Thank you for attending this press conference. This has been another slow week in a country where we're known for governmental indecisions, and so the malaise continues. The highlight of the week, however, was the visit by the President of Ghana. And so when I met the President of Ghana, I, on behalf of the People's Progressive Party, welcome him to our country. And we spoke extensively about our relationship that goes back to the 50s. And I pointed out how Harold Drayton, who was in Ghana at the time the PPP wanted to start the University of Guyana, that is in the pre-independence period, sought to get a release from Harold Drayton from the Ghanaian government to come back to establish the University of Ghana, and that's how it started. And I pointed out to the President that even Brinley Ben was sent to Ghana and met Kwame Nkrumah in 1958 on behalf of the People's Progressive Party. And particularly at the time when we had the externally inspired division of our people, we sought some help from Ghana to ensure that we could overcome some of the ethnic tensions in that period. And so we spoke about our history and our shared kinship because a lot of our people have come from Ghana in the period of slavery, from different tribes, etc. And the President inquired of me about the political situation, particularly on the elections, because obviously he would have been briefed about the no confidence motion. So I pointed out to him that a lot in terms of the timing of elections would depend on the ruling of the CCJ next week, Tuesday. And we had a discussion on democracy. So as you know, both countries have had an undemocratic past. It's only the last maybe 3 or 4 presidents of Ghana who have been able to be democratically elected and serve out their entire term. Even Nkrumah himself was deposed by a coup, and almost for 3-4 decades, almost every government had been deposed by an army coup. And so for the President of Ghana, who also comes from that era, you know, his age, etc., he's very familiar with how lack of democracy affected Ghana. I related to our similar circumstances in Ghana. I related to him similar circumstances of 3 decades of undemocratic rule here. And the President made a statement, and he said, I support democracies. Democracy is the basis for stability in any country. And we share those values. And when we spoke about elections, so I said, should the PPP emerge, we would like to continue to work with Ghana, and we'd like to take up the offers that you made at the state luncheon about sharing experience in the fledgling oil and gas industry. And he said to me explicitly that the promise I made was not to an individual or to a party, it was to the country. So whoever prevails at the elections, we will be only too happy to work with. And so on that note, we ended the meeting, but we were very happy that the President took time. I know it's just a one-day visit, because one full-day visit, but we can only benefit from leaders around the world coming to our country, learning of our challenges, etc. And so once again, on behalf of the PBP, make it clear that we welcome the President of Ghana coming to Guyana. Today, talking about an undemocratic history, and the conversation that I just related to you, today marks the 39th year since Walter Rodney was brutally assassinated by the PNC regime. And that represented a huge loss for Guyana. I've traveled extensively around the world, and many people know Guyana only because of Walter Rodney, particularly in Africa, especially among some of the leaders, like the president of Uganda. Every time I meet him, he relates something about Walter Rodney. In fact, one time he saw me at a meeting, this was just a few years ago. I'd left office, and he sought to get Pat Rodney's number from me. So a whole generation of leaders in Africa, as well as young people who went to university and had the pleasure of listening to Walter Rodney, were inspired by him. I met a young parliamentarian from Kenya when I was heading the Commonwealth observer mission to Sri Lanka for elections. This is also after I left. And she told me about the close relationship and she had with Walter Rodney and how he inspired her. So Africa knows a lot about Guyana because of Walter Rodney, but also he helped to stimulate a critical analysis of Europe and North-South relationship. And you know his seminal work on how Europe underdeveloped Africa was used extensively throughout Africa, and until today is one of the staples for university education, particularly in the social sciences across Africa. So it's very, it's a tragic loss, not only for Guyana, but the rest of the world. So we have seen recently, we're approaching elections, and suddenly I saw a statement from the WPA claiming that they will never support today. They issued that statement that they would never support electoral fraud in Guyana. And clearly, clearly they know something that I don't know about, but because they're speaking about not supporting electoral fraud. But there's one thing that I wish to draw the country's attention to, because I think in the to and froing between the two parties that we lost sight of the report, a full commission of inquiry that was done in the period 2013, I think, to 2015. And that was not a commission of inquiry with, like the one that, or the ones that we have seen done by this government, where the government handpicked one individual like Trotman's father and put him in charge of a commission of inquiry. That commission of inquiry had solid terms of reference, and it was made up of members of the international community. So I just want you to name the persons who were on the commission of inquiry to demonstrate to you the caliber of individuals who conducted that commission of inquiry. You had Queen's Counsel, Sir Richard Cheltenham, who was the chairman of the commission from Barbados. You had Senior Counsel Sina Jairam from Trinidad and Tobago, and Queen's Counsel Jacqueline Samuels Brown from Jamaica. These were the three commissioners. And it's interesting that they all concluded that this is in the conclusion. We conclude that Prime Minister Burnham knew of the plan and was part of the conspiracy to assassinate Dr. Walter Rodney. The report said it in its findings. So that has never been highlighted because that the killing of Walter Rodney was never highlighted. And today, a lot of people talk, like I saw David Hines saying, again, suddenly being concerned about this assassination. But when the report was tabled in Parliament in 2015, the government said it will not adopt the findings of the report, but acknowledge it. This was in August of 2016, I think. Just acknowledge the report and will not adopt its findings. WPA was part of that presence in the National Assembly. AFC was part of that presence. The people like Nagamoto and Ramjatan, who had always held the view that Walter Rodney was assassinated, suddenly they switched and they agreed with the government that the report findings should not be adopted or acted upon. So I would like to urge Guyanese, this is the report itself. The report even made some recommendations. I'll get to that in a moment, but this is the report. I'm not going to circulate it here, but if Guyanese are interested in seeing not just the tragedy of the killing of Walter Rodney, a political leader in the country, but if they're interested in a recreation of the picture, a picture of how Guyana was managed in that period, because I think the commissioners sought to recreate the kind of intolerance and impunity that characterized that era of government, with unaccountable government and the rigging of elections, etc. They situated this death as, and the cover-up of the death, as a product of that era. And so please go to the party's page, the PPP Facebook page, and you can download a full copy of the report or read it just there. You can get a copy of the report. We've uploaded it, and I think it's in PDF format, so you can download it easily. So people, I think we should, on this day, when 39 years after he's been assassinated, we should just take a look at the report. Now, one of the recommendations from the Independent Commission of Inquiry, International Commission of Inquiry, was this. No party in Guyana should be permitted to tamper easily or at all with the electoral system, such as to secure an unfair advantage. The electoral system should be entrenched in the Constitution and should only be amendable by a 2/3 majority. Besides, the chairman of the Elections Commission should be a person of the highest integrity and non-political, and his or her appointment, which should meet with the approval of opposition groups and special interests, should meet with the interests of opposition groups and interests, and sectoral interests. If felt necessary, the chairman may be sourced from a CARICOM country. The political opposition and other interests should be adequately represented on the commission. So this is what the Commission of Inquiry said about our electoral system, not to have a repeat of what took place in the past. And yet, the WPA, all these years, couldn't speak out against this unilateral appointment of the chairman of GCOM. But this came out in the Walter Rodney report. Suddenly, today we see David Hines conveniently saying they're not going to support rigged elections in Guyana. Well, we are happy for that, but it's very, it seems to me, very, very convenient. I want to speak a bit, and I'm sure a lot of you may want yes. So it's Kwame McCoy coming to disrupt my press conference. So I've seen yesterday Gordon Mosley getting a selective leak, and Gordon, you are a very privileged category.
We all are.
You seem, not we all are, you seem to be getting information ahead of even the state media from from government sources. You're very, very privileged, and I'm glad that you're here today.
Let's pass one or two.
You wouldn't carry them even if I passed them to you. You wouldn't carry them, or you'd put a twist to what I tell you. But one thing that I must commend Gordon Mosley for, which the Chronicle left out of their story today, and don't look at me with trepidation, Gordon, not that the government would be upset with you for releasing this, is that he says here, the poll was commissioned by the APNU AFC coalition. So the Chronicle left that out, creating the impression that this was an impartial, independent poll that was done by someone from across the region, and found that these enormous, high approval ratings for President Granger. This is an APNU AFC commission poll. They paid for this, and I wouldn't put it past them to use taxpayers' money to pay for this too. So, but this is an APNU poll. Now, one thing with polls is that parties tend to do polls, and they keep the information to guide their campaign, what their messaging should be, and what they should focus on. To our surprise, APNU didn't keep it to guide their campaign. They released the findings of this poll. So that tells me a lot. And I'm sure that the paragraph that both, I think for the credibility of the pollster, he must have insisted that any leak should include the following sentence, which was repeated in both Chronicle and Gordon Mosley. It says here, and direct quote, that in this regard, respondents could say yes or no, regardless of their political persuasion, since it is possible for a person to approve of President Granger's leadership and still support the PPP Civic. That is the saving grace for the pollster. So they're saying, the pollster is saying, hold on a minute. This so-called, all this high approval rating for President Granger may come from people who will vote for the PPP Civic. And I suspect the polls would not only speak about President Granger's approval. When you do a poll, you poll other things. You poll, will you win the elections or not? What's your support across the country? Notice that they're gonna put, well, I'm glad that they just posted that, as Gordon Mosley knows now. They just posted that, but I'm interested in seeing that too. How they polled there about the results of the elections. So let me go through a couple of things. I think that this is serious desperation on the part of the government. So many people, they polled on the benign issues. You know, do you like President Granger? Let me see what the questions are. Is he pleasant? Is he pleasant? And President Granger scores 13% and Irfan Ali 3%. Is the president genuine and trustworthy, etc.? So I went through all of these issues, and I see that the president scored higher than our candidate from an APNU poll, which is expected. They don't put our release that our candidate, it doesn't make sense, is polling higher, except in for one area where they couldn't really release any other results. So who is more mature or younger? And Irfan Ali won on that one. But 1/3 of the people polled said Granger is younger than Irfan Ali too. So that's it. 6% said Granger and 13% in for Irfan Ali. That this is on youth. So Irfan Ali is 38 years old. Granger is in his 70s. And still a third said, oh, Granger is younger than Irfan Ali. It's quite interesting for me. I look at it, and this is desperation. Any party that has to release its poll like this and talk about pleasantness. So let's talk about the real issues. If they poll President Granger on keeping promises, he gets 0. He would get 0. He's not kept any promise. Look at this. These are the promises kept, delivered. So this is how they're delivering promises. Promises delivered, creating jobs in the oil and gas industry. So look at this image. You will think that's Guyanese working there. Guess where they took it from? Schlumberger video, right? So this is, yeah, Schlumberger video. This is a generic stock. This one here with the kids providing better access to potable water and improve sanitation, all Guyanese, is development policy blog. This came from stock images on the internet. This is what they're doing. And I pointed out how ridiculous this is. If President Granger is polled on keeping promises, he'll get 0. If he is polled on condoning corruption, he will get the highest point, again, for condoning corruption. That's where he will outscore Irfan Ali by a margin of 100 to 1. If he is polled on management of Guyana, he will get 0. If he is polled on job creation, he will get 0. He is the president who has lost the most jobs in 4 years than any other president. In the history of Guyana, no other president has lost more jobs than President Granger in office. And in terms of creating new jobs, we cook up and selling pepper sauce, can't cut it. Can't cut it in today's world. If President Granger is polled on being ceremonial, the most ceremonial president ever, he'll score high there. And about handling new wealth, oil and gas wealth, look at his experience with the 18 million signing bonus. 18 million. So those are the key things. Healthcare, education, jobs, cost of living, crime. Not about who smiles better, who is more pleasant. That is what they release. Who is this pure nonsense on those things. And as the pollster correctly said, the bread and butter issues are issues that people want to vote for. So let me go through the sectors again. On with what justification would sugar workers have to vote for this government after they promised them to increase their salaries and 7,000 lost their jobs and another 4,000 indirectly. 11,000 people. What are the miners going to do? They promised the miners everything under the sun, duty-free fuel, everything. They would all get, the small miners would all get land. Now as we are approaching it, they have a lottery in Bartica. But guess what? All the prime lands have been taken out of the lottery already for ministers and their family. So that's not going to be part of the lottery. So what are the miners going to vote for? Or the Amerindians, who haven't had a single land title given to them, although they were told that it's accelerated. I can go down a list of people. So that's the real thing, not this fake poll. This is a fake poll with fake results that APNU paid for. And this is intended to talk up their chances at the elections. That's how they work. Obviously, this was designed to hopefully talk up their chances at results. We're not even bothered. We too have done some polling, but we're not so desperate as to have it released. We have done some polling, and let me tell you one thing. It shows the PPP massively, massively ahead of APNU in the elections, massively. But we are not arrogant. We're not complacent. We're working hard because we want every Guyanese to see how different we are and what our plans are for the country. And so we're not going to, this is what I think about the polls. Now, I've seen Minister Harman saying somewhere that oh yes, they keep changing musical chairs, right? I don't even remember some. They have so many ministers now. That's it. It's taxing my memory. It's taxing my memory. So many ministers and sycophants all around the place. So the headline is Harman confirms arbitrary firing of PSM staff. I'm told that when Lincoln Lewis was called from the TUC, he said he hasn't had a chance to look into the matters yet. Weeks have passed. The GPSU is silent on the matter. But trust me, if that had happened under the PPP, every day we would have had statements emanating from GPSU, from Lincoln Lewis, and we would have had protests already outside our offices, where all the personnel staff were fired arbitrarily, and the accountant too. And so Harman said, this is direct quote, in fact, it is known that that minister did in fact purported to have fired these persons. It's not purported to have fired these persons. There's a letter that's been revealed to the press that the persons were fired by the minister in spite of the misleading report in Chronicle. As of now, I think that decision is in abeyance, pending an inquiry, which will be conducted in a short time to determine whether in fact there were any breaches, grounds for dismissals, but certainly an inquiry is going to be held into that. They're presently on administrative leave rather than dismissed. So he's saying that the minister acted arbitrarily, exceeded her authority, and that it was reversed, that this was reversed. And so what disciplinary actions would be taken against this minister? On whose instruction? This is supposed to be a fresh face in the government, but went in with the same sort of heavy-handedness that they have done. The Simona Brooms type of management, you know, with the security guard and everything else. Go in and just fire the entire staff in a letter that she wrote herself. So what disciplinary actions will be taken against the minister? But more importantly, didn't the media ask at this same press conference, how come the 100,000 US dollars or $20 million left the coffers of the Treasury through the Ministry of the Presidency and ended up in the bank accounts of two of Simona Broom's children. Did anybody ask that? That's the critical question for Harman. How did it happen? And what was it for? And the deafening silence from the government on this matter makes me believe that it was a corrupt act. And I do believe that the period when the staff was fired, that all the files would have been disappeared, because I suspect other ministers have been beneficiary to that from that slush fund that they have there, and ministers' children. Some of them have been huge beneficiaries to this. And so that is the critical question here today. And so this brings me back to what David Hines said in a letter hoping to recover after he called for a commission of inquiry to hunt down PPP moles in the public service. He says he made in another letter to the newspapers, in letter to Stabroek News, David Hines said, I made a clear distinction between career public servants or whistleblowers and political spies or mole acting as public servants. Well, if they have to be public servants or not once they're working there. They can't be acting as public servants. So in these cases, so it's pure nonsense. It's pure nonsense. He is not looking at the crime. He is concerned about who releases the information. If it's someone sympathetic to the PPP, it must be, the person must lose their job. But if the person is a career public servant, then that person should not lose their job. This is a witch hunt. This is putting your foot deeper into your mouth. That's it. Deeper, further down. And it goes in the same letter that these reports are given only to or mostly to the PPP should raise eyebrows about the motive of the so-called whistleblowers. They're given to me because I've been asking for them, and nobody else is carrying them. Every week at my press conference, I come and urge people to release this, and because we've been exposing this. When people write the newspapers, sometimes even the newspapers don't carry these issues. Who they're going to release it to? Send it back to Harman and cover it up back again there? Or who else are they going to release this information to? But he's more concerned that the PPP, and it's not the PPP, I hold a constitutional office as leader of the opposition. I have a fiduciary duty too. Apart from state duties, I'm a member of parliament. This is not a partisan issue. This has to do with public funds. And as a fiduciary, having that fiduciary duty, information can come and should come to me to expose corruption. He is not worried about exposing the corruption. It's because Jagdeo gets the information. He wants them to send it to David Hines, and then it will be okay. They're not going to be PPP spies in the public sector. And then he goes back to something he's always said. This kind of belief that any attempt by the PPP to work hard to get more Afro-Guyanese to join the PPP is seen as a threat to APNU and people like David Hines. The worst thing that could happen to them is if we have a unified country and the PPP looks like Guyana. I think they fear that. And we're not going to stop working at that. Every single day we're going to go into the Afro-Guyanese communities to work hard so that people understand what we stand for. They're not going to deter it. So he said we're using these whistleblowers as African spies and enforcers. Not because they're decent people who don't want corruption in their ministries and exposing the corruption. The minister children get $20 million when she can afford it, and you can't find the $10,000 to give to, you took away the $10,000 from people's children. You can't afford that, but the minister children get $20 million transferred into their accounts. Because the decent people, suddenly they become African spies and and enforcers in their communities. This is how he characterizes them. And then he says, barring a tsunami, APNU will get his vote. So we know where he's coming from, because we're not going to have a tsunami soon. So you know he is voting for APNU. This is an apologist letter who masquerades on a platform of civil rights for Afro-Guyanese, but does nothing really when they come under assault on a daily basis to earn a living. Nothing. Whether their lands are taken away or no opportunities. No, you don't see them there. They only write in the newspapers. So this is what we have. And you're going to see more and more of it. More and more of this. On the on Nisil and Gaisuko, I see that is a major thing now. I think it's reported extensively in today's newspapers. And so I saw the president on June 7 going to Albion, and the president made a long speech, a long, as is usual, fluff type of speech. You know, and halfway through, you said, we've been there before, done that before, heard that before, the usual speech. But he said, I am here to find out what your problems are. I'm here to fix things. This is on June 7th of this year. He went to Albion to fix things. And then we have this release from Gaisuko. He can't fix the relationship between Gaisuko and Nisil, two state entities. And all it takes for him to do is to call them to his office and say, cut out this nonsense. I want to see where the money is being spent. Oh, that's all it requires. And he has to go to Albion to tell people that he's fixing things. He dared to fix things. So now this release here is a damning release from a state agency accusing the SPU of undermining privatization, of engaging in illegal acts, of recruiting the consultant to do the valuation on the basis of a personal relationship. That is the valuation that Guyana now must accept in the privatization process. And Gaisuko in itself has grave concerns about how the consultant was recruited. But more importantly, this is Gaisuko saying, additionally, this is on the last page, additionally, Gaisuko is still awaiting a full report from Nisil SPU on all and any transactions which were completed or are in the process in relation to its immovable and movable assets. So clearly, Gaisuko doesn't know what is being sold out and what they're keeping. And they don't get any information. They're just like us in the public domain. Remember last week I pointed out how they're moving assets from the serviceable register to the unserviceable and then selling them out. So Gaisuko doesn't know this itself and says, including the scrap metals, machinery, plant, and equipment. So Gaisuko is telling us this through this release in the media. You ask Nisil about who got the scrap metal deal for Wales, because it runs into billions of dollars of scrap metal, and until now that is state secret. Although that should have been procured, the person should have gone through a competitive process. Gaisuko is saying the country doesn't know, we don't know. Only Nisil and the person who got the contract knows. And this is government assets, Gaisuko's assets. And Gaisuko would also like to be informed by Nisil of the extent of the valuation done by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Were all 4 estates, including cultivation and other assets, valuated? So Gaisuko is saying now, PricewaterhouseCoopers did a valuation. We have called for it to be released. But even Kaisuko has not seen that evaluation of their assets. This is the most damning thing. If this doesn't require the commission of inquiry, nothing does. But it's happening before our nose and it's playing out in the public domain, and we just move on, we just drift on. Large-scale corruption taking place before our eyes on the sale of the scrap metal, all of these things. And now, right now, NISIL, I pointed out how NISIL doesn't, they bypass the whole structure we had set up for privatization. So NISIL is selling out blocks of land at Lilendal. I heard where the specialty hospital was going, that they're working behind the scenes through middlemen and brokers to sell off the land where the specialty hospital would have gone. Secondly, the other lands at Lilendal are being sold by or leased by either NISIL or Lands and Survey. There are many, many areas. At Wales, we heard they sold already, or they lease lands and that have not been gazetted as yet. So you can check the official gazette. But, and these are PNC bigwigs or businessmen who are prepared to pay a bribe. And they're rushing to get it all done. We don't know about this. Every time, the media used to criticize the PBP about privatization, but did you check? Every time there were these things privatized, there was an ad in the newspapers, ads in the newspapers pointing this out. Secondly, it went from unit to the privatization board. You had the labor movement, the private sector, consumer affairs. Then it went to cabinet. NISIL is now, NISIL and the Lands and Survey, particularly these two agencies, are just giving up every bit of land, and they're collecting large sums of money in bribes. But I want to warn the businessmen and those who are engaged in this, that if they believe that this would fly in the long run and that we're not going to come back and look into all these transactions, they have it wrong. They have it wrong, because we're going to do that. We're not going to tolerate this wanton giveaway of the resources. This brings me to the oil industry, and I've seen some really wild calls in the public domain. Some to ban ExxonMobil and the others for 10 years. So we should not move to producing oil from the end of the year. They should sell off and ban them. I've seen Eric Phillips saying that there is enough in the public domain about 2 blocks, Kaichur and Kanji, for President Granger to rescind the licenses. Granger needs to say whether that's so. I saw Harman said SARA is an independent body and that they don't know what's going on. But let me tell you, let me make it clear once again. Every statement we have made, Ramatar, Jagdeo, the PPP, we said, let us by all means have an independent investigation of all of the blocks. If that's what you want, we will go with it. Let's have an international firm that we all trust come and do this, and wherever the chips fall, that we deal with it. If that leads to recommendations to rescind, you'd have to go with the recommendations. But you can't have people who have vested interests doing this. First of all, the credibility of SARA itself. But it came to my office, and I'm tracking this down, that Eric Phillips himself, who's special assistant to SARA, was with a group that applied for a block 2 that he didn't get. After, you recall, I had said in somewhere in 2017, I think, that there were some people who were working to get, through a corrupt deal, to give the blocks out to them, that there were two groups, and that is why we were calling for an auction now. So go back to the media, the newspaper reports, and you will see what I said in that period in 2017. So I gather he was part of one of those groups that was applying. So obviously our call for it to be auctioned in the future, now that we have found oil and we have the takers, kill that effort. So he's not an uninterested party. I've seen a letter about Dr. Mangal, and I'm not going to say much about him, but some serious questions were posed to him too, today, and he should answer that. So the whole issue is, should we have an investigation or should we not have an investigation? And we in the PPP believe that in the public domain, that there have been several calls for an investigation from various sources, that maybe you should pursue one. But it has to be done by a credible body. It has to be done by a credible body. And what should it include? It should include all of our actions in the oil industry. It's as simple as that. We have nothing to hide about this matter. And once there is an independent investigation, and if there's wrongdoing, we will support action taken against the wrongdoers, whichever side of the political spectrum they come from. And so, but not a single thing has been proven about wrongdoing so far. Yet they're in the public domain. You know, when an investigative agency really is investigating, they don't give reports every day to the newspapers and contradictory reports. What SARA is doing is in a political game, but I think everybody knows that there are politicians there. So I'm not going to get caught up too much in that issue, because we've made our position clear as daylight, and I've just mentioned it. So I want to deal with the GRA matter again. So last week I was asked if the commissioner, I believe that the commissioner is involved in this, the Commissioner General at GRA. And I said, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he doesn't know about this information. Therefore, I'm mentioning it here, hoping that he would investigate and take action. Now, let me repeat what happened. 2 vehicles came in from Venezuela, were seized in Letem, 2 Land Cruisers, Toyota Land Cruisers, in May of this year. Those 2 vehicles were then registered to a PNC individual in March. So the registration was backdated. The vehicles were seized in May. They came in only in May, backdated to March of 2019. The numbers for the vehicle, so I went even as far as to give numbers. PXX 6337 and PXX 6338. These, we have all the information. I pointed out that in the registration document they left blank also, which is a requirement as to how you source the vehicle. That's left blank. We have all of the information. So after my press conference, I was hoping that the Commissioner General would pick up his phone and say, is this so? When did the vehicles come in? And they would have told him. And then he would ask, when were they registered? And if he's told this, the next thing he would do, put out a statement and call in the police. Because this is corruption, this is fraud. Fraud to do that backdate vehicle. And sell, I'm not even so sure it's sold. Might be given or sold below value. So until now, nothing. Not a word. But so that's the Thursday. On Saturday, Kaichur News, and it seems like a little pattern. Every time we point out a major issue, the Kaichur then brings up something else. So guess what the article on June 8 in Kaichur News? GRA discovers skullduggery in G-series vehicles, closes loopholes. So suddenly, if the people reading, they would say, oh, GRA discovered something there, and they close loopholes. And when you have not a loophole here, you have a massive canyon here that things are just flowing through all the time that we pointed out to. And they closed the loophole, but they left open the big gaping hole here. So it creates, sidetracks people. Oh, they discovered this, yes. But that's not the issue. The issue has been about these two vehicles, and then I went on further to say that there are hundreds of vehicles, luxury vehicles, Land Cruisers, Lexus, Hummers, BMWs that came into the country, were seized by GRA, never made it to the register for the want of entry, and so were never gazetted and placed at the auctions, that there are hundreds of vehicles found their ways into the hands of people sympathetic to the government, resulting in billions of dollars of lost revenue. I said if the commissioner doesn't have anything to hide to, he'd call in the Auditor General. I have not seen any movement on that. So why is it can't we just call this commissioner and ask him? The media seems like they're not concerned about this. If it was one vehicle under the PPP, they would have been hung in the PPP every single day. I'm talking about hundreds of vehicles, hundreds. I gave you the details here of two vehicles and nothing. One story so far, GRA closes loophole. They haven't closed anything. So I'm hoping this week I'll see some action here. But nevertheless, today we wrote the police. Because if the GRA is not going to write the police, so the police have now been written to about this issue because it's fraud. And so let's see what the police will do on this matter. We have seen also another matter that came up. So we've been talking about PPDI and the spate of power outages and the spares that they're using that are coming from fake sources and that they're not performing in keeping the engines going. And we've pointed out how fake the assertions are that the spate of blackout has to do with just the cables, because the blackout preceded the cable being cut. And these two cables cut conveniently in a matter of a week. So we pointed all of that out. I'm not going to go back there again. What bothered me, I saw a group of public-spirited citizens protesting the blackout in front of the ministry. And the minister made fun of it. He came out and he was posing for selfies with this grin on his face, sarcastic grin on his face, as though this issue, which is affecting the lives of thousands of people now across Ghana, is a matter to laugh about. He's not laughing about the 9,000 which he's refusing to give answers to. He's not laughing about that issue or the Harbor Bridge issue. He's giving no answers to those. But he came out on the road to talk to people. But in spite of that, suddenly we hear that Wartsila, a story in Kaichor News, went back to Wartsila was seriously overbilling GPL for parts and services. It's all fake, but the story was written like it's PPDI writing the story. And my point is that whatever, even if there were overbilling, which is not so, but what does that have to do with the blackouts now? This is the 5th year in this office in government. What are your plans? Clearly, they have no plans. So now this is also softening. Every time we put out something about the government, it seems as though another story comes out, which is totally irrelevant to the whole issue, like the G-series, or in this case, PPDI, and that is an excuse. And we've seen this in the oil and gas sector too. I've noticed that Mr. Trevor Ben also been speaking recently, but there's been a huge corruption. And if David Hines is interested in whistleblowers who are career people, he should talk to the surveyors and the staff of Lands and Survey about what's going on in there, about the wanton giveaway of resources. But of course, since he supports the government, he doesn't want that to come out. And if any one of them release it, it would be PPP spies again. So the staff in there totally disillusioned, demoralized, and they're giving out large tracts of land, as I pointed out before. We have a report that the chairman of MMA has a company, established a company that got 11,000 acres of land assigned to his company in the Region 5. He refuses to answer that question. The media called him, he refuses to answer. And he now just recently became the chairman of the board, and the company was incorporated recently. And on the other hand, they're taking away land from all the cattle rearers and rice farmers and everybody else, people of every race. And so that is what's happening in these areas. I noticed that Ivelaw Griffith is leaving, and I'm very concerned about gaps at the University of Ghana. I've stayed away from the matter, but this issue, the government doesn't seem to be even addressing the issue. And you're going to have major fallout at the University of Guyana. They have a major fallout there. I'm going to mention one thing else and then open up the floor for questions. The Minister of Public Security has said that things are safe, etc. And I can't help but look in. Somebody sent me a copy of the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, the Public Safety Department, sending out a security advisory for staff. It says all members of staff, one, should be on alert at nights when moving around the hospital complex for persons posing as patients in an attempt to rob them of their property. 2, members of staff should avoid wearing excessive jewelry, especially at night when on duty. 3, members of staff, especially female, should ensure their cell phones are properly secured in their possession when moving around the hospital complex, especially at night. 4, staff when moving in and around the hospital complex, especially at night, should try to move in company of 2 or more persons. And it goes on. Staff should avoid walking in dark places, etc. So you need to hire a personal bodyguard if you're a staff in the Georgetown Hospital compound. And this is just in the compound, much less what's happening on the street. And this government lives with the illusion that things are improving in those sectors. Look at Diamond. The machines are down, drug shortages, staff shortages, the hinterland, the same thing, shortage of drugs, etc. That is what's happening right across the health care sector. But Granger is getting high marks for smiling at people. And then the last one, I saw Ramjatan. Ramjatan saying he's confident of their victory at the meeting, the FC Congress tomorrow. So, and I see he endorsed Duncan too. Duncan has gotten quite a few endorsements recently. I suspect he may deliver a couple of votes. But the poll done by the government, APNU AFC, said something very interesting. And I'm wondering if this is to help Nagamutu. So it says, Paul Nagamutu is preferred as PM candidate. So Nagamutu got 38%. Katius 18%. Trotman 14%. Garrido Low 7%. And Ramjatan 5%. That is in their poll. So I wonder if Ramjatan believes in this poll. Somebody should ask him if this poll numbers really reflect the true position of the country. Or the supporters of APNU AFC, this is their preference to you. Boy, things look bleak for you if this is true. But for him, the good thing about it is that this is a fake poll. This is a fake poll designed to help APNU. They're desperate. If they were so confident and Granger had such a high rating and they were doing so well, why not call elections? Imagine when you have those sorts of approval ratings, you just call elections. They've been hiding, running, coming up with 34 is the majority of 65 just to avoid going to elections. That's the litmus test. If you believe you're so popular, you're getting 94% of the country will vote for you or somebody like that, then call elections. Call elections. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Could you provide an update on Dr. Lunson's condition? How is he doing?
This morning I got a call from the media as to whether I knew whether Roger was hospitalized. So at that time, this was around 10 o'clock or so. I didn't at that time. So I called Shalene, but she didn't answer. So I then called home, and a young person told me yes, and he had gone to the hospital about an hour prior to that. He's gone to the hospital. Roger's been to the hospital a few times before. Yes. So we're hoping that everything goes well and he goes back home safely.
You spoke about you'd support a credible investigation into the allegations. Sir, what are some of the features you recommend for this credibility that you're talking about? And any thoughts as the country awaits to choose their decisions on foreign matters?
The credible thing, I think we should work out like national terms of reference. Get everyone together. So get the private sector, get the political parties, and they do clear terms of reference, all right? So that everybody is at one on this. And then the scope of the investigation. So should it cover everyone? Because there is a feeling, I think it should cover everyone. So you define the scope of the investigations. You come up with the terms of reference, and then you maybe approach an international organization of repute to do this. Because I can't tell you exactly whom, but somebody who is not part of our landscape that can bring an impartial view that all sides, the oil companies as well as the government of Guyana and the people of Guyana will have credibility in. So they are not treated unfairly too. They don't feel it's a witch hunt against them. And that sort of approach, we can support that. But we can't support this Sarah doing this. They're too partisan. Every single day they just thing. And they're going to use this to shake down the oil companies. I'm telling you, they're going to go and approach them. That used to happen at Soku. The businessmen used to say quietly that people come at night and they say, we'll raid you, or tonight we heard that you're laundering money, etc. And then they have to pay them. It used to happen. And so sometimes these things, you create the problem, and then you approach the companies quietly. Your problem will go away if you support us. So that's basically what we will support. Clear, the scope defined, the terms of reference defined, a company that, or an institution that has the support of all parties, a credible institution, international. Oh, the CCJ, we as in a PPP are operating on a twin track. We believe we have a good case to win, but you can't predict the results before they actually come out. So we are operating on a twin track. One is if the elections go in our, the no confidence motion ruling goes in our favor, and one, if it doesn't go in our favor, a longer-term strategy, not long-term, because in any case, it's a year away, and so we're still in the campaign mode, but a more, like a little medium distance running, you know, not a sprint. If we are into, if the no confidence motion goes into in our favor, it's 100 meters dash. If not, it's 400 meters.
Mr. Jagdeo, sir, with regards to the Cadre's poll, it found that the population is divided over the outcome of the next elections. But with regards to swing voters, they're leaning towards a change in government. But still they're saying they would prefer the coalition by a slim margin over the PPP, those swing voters. Is your party doing enough, in your opinion, to move those swing voters into your camp? And sir, another interesting thing I saw, based on what has been provided in that poll, points of party in Berbice, the Federal Party, nationally, when they were polled, that party seems to be making some inroads, about 2% in the Berbice area where it is based. Do you think the party may be ignoring, your party may be ignoring these smaller parties at your own risk?
Gordon, there's one thing that, although our polls show we're well ahead, but as I said, in politics, you have to work hard every single day. And the work is not just about sitting back and say, this is a God-given right, oh, we have this support now. Every single day, our activists are on the ground. We've taken out a flyer, and we're going house to house. We were in Buxton, Victoria, Golden Grove, every area, Anns Grove, all South Georgetown. We went to Linden, New Amsterdam, as well as PPP strongholds, Portmont, you know, and more, etc. We went into the hinterland. And on that flyer, it says, we didn't go after APNU too much because people know what has happened. We don't need to tell them about the inept management of the government. We started talking about what we will do for the country, what our plans are, and how they're included. We'd use the remaining time to continue working at that. So every Guyanese, regardless of how you vote, a PPP victory doesn't mean that you're going to lose out in any way, that you have job security, that they're going to work on the things that matter to you, jobs, housing, etc. And on the corruption and other issues, how we're going to tackle those too. So the manifesto will show more about all of these issues. So we're working, we're not treating anything and leaving anything to chances. We're taking everything seriously, including all the other parties. But the good thing about Guyana, and I said it before, there's room for everybody. All the small parties. You know, we have not been criticizing any party because we believe you should compete for ideas about who can manage the country well. But none of those parties can take on APNU or prevent the excesses. Just imagine if we were not here exposing on a weekly basis the excesses or fighting in Parliament for positive jobs and health care and better housing, where we would have been today. The impunity that we see, the heavy-handedness and the high horse behavior, sitting on high horse behavior, all of this sort of stuff would have been 10 times multiplied had the PPP not been breathing down on their neck. None of the small parties do that. They don't. And so that is why when it comes down to basically choices. And so we are not, And we're glad at least the cadres poll show us this close, and it is an APNU commission poll. An APNU poll showing that. Because that's the reality, I think, for the credibility of it. Just imagine what our poll is showing. If the APNU poll is showing that. But in spite of the positive findings of our poll, we are not complacent. People in Guyana, they have to be secure. They have to feel a PPP victory, whoever you are, whichever race you are, whichever party you're in. A PPP victory means a better life for you, and that there will be inclusion and a different sort of politics. We made it clear. We'd have to find a way of working with the PNC after the elections. I've been saying that positively. They don't say that. They can't say that because nobody on their side, no leader will ever say that. And I'm speaking as General Secretary of our party and a former president. I can say that definitively. This is what the PPP has decided, that we have to find ways. I've called for a non-partisan, years ago, approach to the oil and gas sector. We'd have to make that a reality. These are things. So I'm now bothered, and all of this, people have to remember that this is APNU poll. So APNU will release what is favorable to them. What is favorable to them. This is APNU's poll. And I contest the findings on these issues. You can't, clearly, it is, the findings are not accurate. Our findings are very different. People in APNU base are concerned about President Granger. They may like the same thing, like him benignly. They may say, oh, he's a good man and stuff like that, you know, family man, goes to church, but he can't run the country. Can't run the country. He can't run the country. He don't make no decision. You allow everything. We're just losing jobs, etc. Just making excuses. That's the finding.
But sir, based on the poll too, in terms of likability, they were also zeroing in on that. Do you think the numbers that are pointing towards your candidate may force the party to put him out more in certain circles? Okay. Because you see more of you than him.
Sure. So the thing is that Irfan Ali has been working where it matters. It's on the ground. It's on the ground. So at the appropriate time when the campaign starts, you're gonna see much more of this, of him here. That depends on Tuesday what happens. But right now, Irfan Ali has a duty as a member of the PPP to go to almost every community or every region and spend time talking to people, real people who lost jobs, who want a job, who want housing, who want their improvement in healthcare. We want him to be blooded that way. When he gets into office, he must never forget. He must see people's faces in his head. That I never forget that, what he has been on the ground. Not this aloof type of leadership where all your ministers say everything is wonderful and they paint a great job for Granger. You're doing great. We're delivering on the good life, promises delivered, etc. You live in a bubble. And leaders can't live in bubble. And that is what will make him a great president. Touching there. And he's doing this in the Amerindian areas. He spent over 2 weeks in the hinterland. And he's doing it in black communities, Indian community, wherever. You've got to go there. You've got to make an effort to understand people and to see them. They must see you in a real life situation. You know, getting the newspapers all the time, this is a waste of time what I'm doing, basically. I should be on the ground, too. I'm not saying that being with the media before next thing I see a statement come out. I'm not just saying, but really, I should be more on the ground, too. Because it's necessary. And we don't want to be like the Granger administration, one press conference in 13 years.
And sir, with the GRA vehicles, finally for me, with the GRA vehicles, VX6, could you say who they may have been registered to? That is one.
And Gordon, you call your contacts in government. Yes, but I want you to do a bit of the work. You see, if it was a PPP, you'd be living outside GRA. If a PPP person, man, Jagdeo must tell me who, right? But call your contacts, they'll tell you.
And sir, I know you mentioned the issue with regards to the money and Minister Broom's children. Could you say whether your party is aware of a probe being conducted looking at a scholarship for the daughter of former Minister Frank Anthony, and that scholarship running over $30 million, and then her indicating to the government via public service that she will not be able to honor her part of the scholarship due to ill health or something like that?
First time I'm hearing about it. I never heard about that. I don't know. But you have inside info. So maybe you can, yes, but no, you have inside info, and maybe we can get answers to both questions. But the government has been hiding for 4 weeks, and you know Simona Brooms is not very tight-lipped on other matters. But how come is she so tight-lipped on this one?
Okay,
Thank
here's a question, sir.
Yes.
Regarding what you spoke about the investigation, SARA investigation into the articles, former President Donald Rumsfeld issued an extensive statement, and you keep supporting an investigation. But have you been able to get Robert Prasad's take to understand, as the leader of the party, if the possibility exists that this government, or sorry, SARA can find anything in an investigation? Or is it just, you just know only what the former president said?
So what I've done is, as head of the party, as general secretary of the party, I have to define the party's position. The party's position on this matter is, if there is a need for an independent investigation, we will support it. One. Two, the independent investigation cannot be done by SARA. And that whatever the consequences and findings are, we'd live with the findings. We don't have anything to hide as a party. So you're not going to have a party arguing against that kind of commission of inquiry. So that's not Robert Prasad is not a member of the People's Progressive Party now. So I have to look out for the People's Progressive Party's position on the matter. What I've been assured from all around, but that there has been nothing to hide. So everyone supports an impartial investigation. And former President Ramatar also mentioned that in his release. So why not do it? Why not just do it rather than everyday people saying they're going to do it? Just do it. You know, and let's move on. But on the other hand, what about the 2016 one that Raphael Trotman signed and at that time I think Jan Mangal was still advisor, under the same terms and conditions as the contracts that Ramatar signed, the agreements that Ramatar signed. And at that time, we knew that there was 3 billion barrels of oil at that time. And the same conditions, exact same conditions. So that's why I'm in favor, if you're doing the scope, the investigation must cover everything, all of the blocks. And so it seems as though Trotman is getting a free pass now too. Have you asked Trotman about that?
Sir, do you think Mr. Prasad, the former Minister of Natural Resources, was forthcoming with former President Ramatar about some...
Well, I don't know. You ask us. I can't speak for Prasad, nor can I speak for Ramatar on those matters, what private conversations they have or not. You ask them that. My position is the People's Progressive Party has nothing to be afraid of. I've received assurances that nothing wrong was done, and so we support an investigation, an independent investigation. So that is it. I speak for PPP. I speak for the People's Progressive Party. Now, that Ramatar is a colleague, and he issued a statement. I saw the statement. The gentleman said, we support an independent investigation. Everyone, I don't think Robert Prasad has a different position. So why not just pursue it? But you can't condemn people before and when we have glaring evidence of corrupt acts, like with Patterson. We don't even mention that. And in this case, you only want an investigation, but you're already treating them as criminals. And they support the investigation. That is the difference. So I can't speak for Robert Prasad or Ramatar about what private conversation or what took place in the last government, but I've been assured that nothing was illegally done. I've looked at the facts of the matter too. That when Shell could walk away, all the people who talk about these billions of barrels, when Shell could walk away from this same block that Exxon now have this discovery for $1, it tells me something about, which I know about personally, because I know about the struggle to get people to come and explore. So let me go back. The PPP has nothing to hide. We do this. On the other hand, we are the only party that said, if we win the elections, we're going to go arm's length on the management of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. 2, we'll abolish the Department of Energy in the Office of the President and go back to a technical body, the Petroleum Commission, not ministerial or presidential involvement. Thirdly, we'll criminalize the non-receipt of the disclosure of information. Every Guyanese must know every year how much money we receive from oil companies. The minister can go to jail for 10 years if we don't do that. We have made it clear what we will pass and within what time frame too. And you're going to hear more about it. I've been saying this for almost a year now.
And sir, could you assure the public, because we're now seeing some full-page ads in the newspapers, could you assure the public that you have absolutely no interest, financial or otherwise, in any of those companies that would have been granted oil blocks? And can you say the same?
Oh, that is precisely.
Can you say the same for
so they have
Ramatar and Mr. Prasad?
Yes.
Can you get those assurances?
Yes. Why don't you ask Ramatar, or does President Granger have an interest? Does President Granger have an interest? Does President Granger's nephew has an interest in anything? Have you ever asked President Granger if he has any interest? You're asking me if I have an interest now in oil and gas, any of the companies. The answer is no. The answer is no, not any interest whatsoever. But the question, Gordon Mosley, is loaded. You will never ask that of Granger, although he's been involved. He says, I didn't even read the contract. Have you ever asked Trotman if he has an interest? The thing is that, no, I don't have an interest. You can ask those people if they have interest, and then the investigations would reveal that. But it's a loaded question. So the next thing is that Jagdeo says has no shareholding. So it makes a headline, but in an adverse way. You're transparent, Gordon Mosley. I hope that's not the reason you came. You came because you like the press conference and stuff like that. You like being here. All right. Anything else? Yeah, so
Guyanese now, especially in this period, there is quite a popular trend of if something happens now, they always make the comparison of what was given under the PDP regime. So during your opening statement, you asked for disciplinary action to be taken against the minister for her actions. Most likely, that will be the question. So I'm giving you an opportunity to respond here. When did the PPP take disciplinary action on their ministers when they acted?
Well, give me a case where like a couple of this. We have daily transgressions of constitutional agencies exceeding of authority. Where, for example, tell me which minister under the PPP who said, I've given up the company, I have arm's length relationship with the company, then has her company get contracts in several ministries without tender. Then also we discovered that in her own ministry, her own company got hired without any tender several times to supply services. You give me a PPP minister that we discovered with that sort of arrangement, and where nothing is being done today about that. And then when she's proven to be untruthful because she said she gave up the day-to-day management of the company and until today signs checks on behalf of the company. Which PPP minister did that? Where has been like that investigation which says that the cabinet, a minister bypassed the tender board after took an unsolicited bid to the cabinet approved it. They awarded the contract for $148 million, and they drew down $285 million from the Demerara Harbor Bridge asphalt plant. And the PPC found it illegal, and no action is being taken. Give me an example of which minister has done that. Yeah, well, let's go through these things. Where is $600 million that the president's office set up a private company, like for the Home Stretch Avenue company, put staff and a minister to be part of the board of directors of this company. The company then runs up bills of over $600 million, runs up liabilities. The company disappears. They have no record. And then we took $600 million of taxpayers' money to clear that alone, and plus another $300 million, nearly $900 million of taxpayers' money for the $1.4 billion project. Will you give me an example of that happening in the PPP? Which agency did we set up that squirreled away this money? Even on drug procurement, you used to talk a lot about RAMRU. But when you look at we got criticized heavily for the length of the pre-qualification process. But there was a pre-qualification, and we bought from pre-qualified bidders. In this case, there's no pre-qualification, sole sourcing. And they have a sole source, the PPC said, illegally $605 million in drugs. What action has been taken about the $605 million illegally procured? You show me a case where in the PPP that we took an individual, any individual who's a sympathizer of the PPP, and take his house, give him $25 million to buy a house, and then he rented back the house to us for $12.5 million a month and collected $265 million. And nothing is wrong. Until now, this government is now complaining about it. You show me when that happened under the PP in 23 years. You show me about the 1.1 billion more that they spent. I can go down a long list. I have about 50 issues. I'm asking you publicly to show me that. And that's 23 years of track record. And in 4 years, they've racked up thousands of scandals. And that is why I'm saying this is the most corrupt government in our entire history. And it does so with impunity. Look at this one with the 20 million. They don't believe they should answer us. They don't believe they should answer us. This is what's going on. So that is why. All right. Yeah, go on. Yes.
You make reference to government polls and our polls. I wanted to know where is your poll?
Where is my poll? Let's see. The government poll, where is my... Listen, was that a... I know, let me don't say that we're on TV.
I guess that poll spoke to anything to do with popularity between yourself and the president, or possible seat allocations at the next elections. Anything on that?
I'd be.
Let me just finish this other one. It's on the public servant workers that you said were fired. Weren't they contract workers?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Half of the people are nominated.
But isn't the rule different in terms of hiring and firing?
So the issue here is, what did you fire them for? The issue is, what did you, because you believe they release information that now the $20 million that went from PSM to the minister's 2 children. Is it because of that? Because it's very coincidental. As soon as we released that, they fired the people. Although the information didn't come from them, to be fair to the staff there. But they put the staff there.
You said it came from them? You're saying that
it did not. It did not.
said it came from them?
Huh? What would you say as a reporter where things come from?
No,
but I'm saying, I'm making an affirmative statement. I'm not telling you who it came from, but I'm saying I can affirmatively say that it never came from them. It never came from them. And so I can affirmatively say that. It never came from those people. And so, but whether it came from them or not, it is, the state has a right to know how come the government spent $20 million on 2 kids for ministers. The people of Guyana need to know too. And you tell us why and how. And then how many more? How many more ministers and others have had this arrangement? So we may never know now because the files would disappear. On the PPP poll, we have to still discuss this at the leadership of the party. It's going to be unethical for me to discuss this in the public domain without the party leadership discussing it in great detail. And so when we conclude those discussions, I may be able to answer a few more questions on the matter.
Sir, are you aware of Mid-Atlantic Oil and Gas ever making any financial donation to your party through Mr. Prasad?
I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of it.
Are you aware of any other major company making financial donations to your party through Mr. Prasad, and those donations not making their way into
Lord,
the party's
mostly
office?
you're getting into speculations.
No,
Are
that's
you?
the question.
No. But are you? My answer is no. But do you get money from the government to publish these stories?
No.
No, but okay, that is the question. But already I've done the damage because people across the country believe that that's so. That is how, by posing the questions, you never pose this sort of question. Let me tell you, I made it clear here. I said here, if you follow what I said, that the political parties in Guyana must not, let's have a pact now, not to take money from any oil company. I said that, I proposed it here, not to take any money from oil company. And we have not received a single cent from any oil company.
But the fallout, sir, with you and Mr. Prasad, did it have anything to do with regard to...
I don't know, I never fell out. I never fell out with Mr. Prasad. That's a figment of your imagination.
So you are buddies?
No. I didn't fall out with you, but you know my buddy. All right, so what is it, right? Yeah, okay. So, let me know the good. Yes.
Mr. Jagdeo, there has been sort of a resurrection of an issue that has to do with the ExxonMobil PSA. TIGI is stressing at this point in time that the award of 600 blocks, or allowing ExxonMobil to hold 600 blocks, goes against our procurement laws, our petroleum laws, etc.
Sure.
Do you find validity in that perspective, in that it's illegal?
The question has been posed and answered several times before. We spoke about, when Jana did it, the era. We spoke about the era, I spoke about the force majeure, and I'm really happy that Janet Jagan actually gave ExxonMobil the blocks. And had we not had the expiration, today none of us would have been talking about this. And the same people who were talking a lot now, who have descended on Guyana now, they were disappeared for Guyana for 30 years. They didn't find any interest here. I'm talking about a specific individual and who wants to lecture us now. They wouldn't have been here. So I have nothing to apologize for the PPP awarding the blocks to ExxonMobil to do the exploration, and they found oil. Not just Exxon, but there are several companies. You know, when we say Exxon, I mean there are companies. But in that consortium, you know what I'm talking about, Ness and Hess and Sinok and stuff. So I have no apology for that. Absolutely none on the part of the PPP. But the thing is that if you have an inquiry, let the inquiry deal with all of those issues. We have dealt with it, the reasoning behind it before, and I'm sure that 90% of Guyana is grateful that the PPP pushed in that period when there was no interest in Guyana whatsoever to explore offshore. And when we had all of these blocks and no takers, and people were taking blocks and walking away from them like Shell did, and so many others have done, that we persevere, and today we are on the cusp of enormous wealth.
I understand the mindset of
right.
what
So that
the award
yes,
then,
sure.
But the opportunity came up for Mr. Trotman to rectify that issue or regularize.
Right.
As some
And
right,
exactly. But instead of strengthening, you know what he did? So one would have thought you get this large block. So you would maintain the relinquishment provision. So you know, an oil company, if after a few years they explore, they have to give up. So if you don't explore, you have to start giving up. So you got to give up 25%, etc. So blocks will come back to us from those who can't explore over time. They have to give up. There's something, the relinquishment provision in the law. So you would think if Exxon has this big block, you would keep the relinquishment provision. So if they don't move and find quickly, you give up. This government weakened the relinquishment provision. So it means they can explore and sit on the oil for a long time, or sit on the blocks. That is one of my concerns about the agreement. I said I had issues with the agreement. Instead of strengthening or keeping the old relinquishment provision as per law, they weakened it.
So for you, there's no justification for Trotman saying that he gave the...
No. Trotman is just...
And the next question that I would like to pose, the topic of renegotiation, it's in the media again, and not too far from here we've seen Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley was successful in the renegotiation of LNG contracts. And one of the reasoning behind it was that the contractor should not be allowed to walk away with the lion's share of the country's resources. And the same argument has been used for the ExxonMobil PSA. In light of that, would you say that the PPP would be open to increasing Guyana's share in the ExxonMobil contract?
I have made it clear that if you have better contract administration, this government has just avoided all of its responsibility. Better contract administration. For example, those in the agreement, it speaks about the cost, Exxon's cost before the discovery, the production sharing agreement, and its pre-production costs, and then production costs itself. We believe if you have an aggressive bureaucracy and those costs are inflated, because that happens around the world, that you can save hundreds of millions of US dollars by being more vigilant. This government has hired one guy to head the department who never had any experience in oil and gas. He's only talking about studies. You can get hundreds of millions of dollars more or prevent that Exxon from claiming that as the cost oil, to cover it. That's one. Two, the approval of local content. Government has to do that to ensure more of the benefits flow to our people. So we believe, even without touching the contract, with better contract administration, hundreds of millions of dollars can be saved or flow to Guyana more. And I want to caution about using Trinidad and Senegal. Those are different countries. Here, we have to make sure that the oil companies feel they make money to invest to. But at the same time, as I said before, the good share, hog share of the resources got to come to our people. And we made it clear that future contracts will never give the same concessions, any contract signed by the PPP. This government has not made that clear. They don't even have the model PSA. That's what we said openly. Openly. We said we'll auction future blocks. We'll make sure that none of the companies get the same benefits. The tax benefits are enormous. So we have been talking more about this sector and giving you a clearer idea of what we'll do than the entire government. And they're in charge now. So that is the problem. They're leaving it all to their companies and the others to define where we go in this sector. Yes?
You criticize this government a lot for creating new positions and ministries and so on. You talked about its toll on the public purse. Would this mean that the PPP would look at scaling down so the situation?
Scaling down, definitely. We have already, told you, we'll take the same budget. I had a meeting with the IMF earlier this week, and so we were talking about the explosion in recurrent costs, but for non-productive purposes. So we believe that we can shift a lot of the expenditure back in support to our industries and back to welfare without increasing the budget totally by simply cutting out some of the expenses from government, like this huge sum for maintenance of vehicle, rental of buildings, government rolling out, going to every place, in town. The local travel and subsistence. This year, 1.5 billion more than 2014 per year they'll be spending. All of those things can scale back. Some agencies, some staff, they have a slew of people here and abroad who collect huge salaries and do nothing. And then even the ministers too, on the ministerial number of ministers. So I've mentioned a couple before, but I don't want to scare people off too much.
Quick question. When you
Yeah.
heard that we were talking about the explosion of cost and non-productive service, was this something that the PPP was costing, or is this an agreement that the IMF is seeing, that the organization is seeing this?
No. We suggested, because I wanted to point out that the framework, because too often people present Guyana as getting wealthy from 2020. And everyone is very, very cautious, particularly those who work with numbers, not the guys who, politicians or some oil companies that are talking up the sector. That the people who work with numbers are seeing a different picture on there, that you have to maintain. You can't allow recurrent revenue to grow, expenditure to grow like in the one-ton way it's growing here. And if it's growing, it has to be focused on people, on education, on health, on welfare for older people and kids and stuff like that. That's where it should go. So we talk about how we will maintain a solid macro framework whilst reorienting the expenditure to create more jobs and to create better welfare and to give more incentives to production. We want a model.
Department of Energy.
Right, the Department of Energy. So if that goes, you have the Petroleum Commission doing this work. And it's made up of a technical board and technical staff. Right, purely technical. Not like the government defines the policy, so the government will say, here is the model PSA. This is a model PSA. And then after that, ministers don't have to meet the oil companies every week, because the technical staff interface with them. You need a permit for environment, you go to the EPA. Don't go see no minister. You don't, because now that's what's happening all the time. People have to run around to try to see ministers every day. Yes. Okay, thank you.